The first time I thought I was losing my mind, I was standing in our kitchen holding my own phone. I had just read a message from a number I did not recognize, sent to my husband's phone, that he had left unlocked on the counter while he was in the shower. 3 words. Just 3 words. But they were enough. I miss you. I stood there reading those 3 words and my hands started shaking. And then I heard the shower turn off, and I put the phone back exactly where I had found it, and I stood at the sink and ran the water and told myself to breathe. When he walked into the kitchen, I turned around and I told him what I had seen. What happened next was something I would spend the next 2 years trying to understand. He did not get angry. He did not panic. He looked at me with an expression of such patient disappointment that for a moment, just a moment, I felt ashamed for bringing it up. He said, "You went through my phone." I said, "It was unlocked on the counter. I saw it by accident." He said, "And you read my private messages." I said, "I saw 3 words. Who sent that?" He sighed. The sigh of a man dealing with something exhausting. He told me it was a colleague, someone going through a hard time at work who had reached out to the wrong number. He showed me the full thread, a few messages back and forth that looked, on the surface, completely innocent. He said he had not mentioned it because it was nothing, and he had not wanted to give me something to worry about knowing how I got sometimes. I apologized. That was the beginning. His name was Derek. We had been married for 4 years. Before that, we had dated for 2. 6 years total. I had built my entire adult life around this man, and I loved him in the way you love someone you have chosen completely, with your whole self, without reservation. He was smart and funny, and everyone who met him liked him immediately. He had a way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. I had felt that way for 6 years. I had not noticed that the feeling had slowly been replaced by something else entirely. The something else had a name. I just did not know it yet. Gaslighting. After the phone incident, I started paying closer attention. Not obsessively, just noticing things I had explained away before. The late nights that happened in clusters. Always with a good reason, always just plausible enough. The way his phone was suddenly always face down. The gym routine that had started 6 months ago and taken on a kind of religious consistency. Small things I tried to file away as nothing. But then, there was the lipstick. I found it in the pocket of his jacket when I was taking things to the dry cleaner. It was not my shade. It was not even a shade I would wear. A deep burgundy that I looked at for a long time before I put it in my pocket and said nothing. That evening I brought it out after dinner. I placed it on the table between us. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. And then he said, "Where did you get that?" I said, "Your jacket pocket." He picked it up and turned it over in his hand like he was seeing it for the first time. And then he said, "This is yours. You must have left it in my jacket." I told him I had never owned that shade in my life. He said, "Are you sure? Because I feel like I have seen you wear something like this." I said, "Derek, I have never owned that lipstick." He set it down. He looked at me with that same patient expression, and he said, "I am a little concerned about you lately. You have been so anxious and suspicious. Is everything okay? Do you want to talk to someone?" I sat at that table and I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Because for one terrible second I thought, am I misremembering? Do I own something like this? Is it possible I put it in his jacket and forgot? I went to the bathroom and I checked. Every lipstick I owned. Every single one. Nothing close to that shade. But the seed had been planted. And that was the point. Over the next 6 months, I started keeping a journal. Not because I had decided to document evidence. Just because I needed somewhere to put things that felt real. A place where I could write down what had actually happened before he had a chance to reframe it. The journal saved me. because it happened again and again. I would notice something, bring it to him, and somehow by the end of the conversation I was the one apologizing. Clara had tried to warn me. 6 months before the night everything changed, we had lunch, and she had looked at me across the table and said, "I need to say something, and I need you to hear it without getting defensive." She told me I was not myself, that the woman sitting across from her was quieter, smaller, more careful than the person she had known for 15 years. She said she did not know what was happening inside my marriage, but she knew something was wrong. I told her she was overreacting. I told her Derek and I were going through a difficult patch and that I had been stressed at work. I told her I appreciated her concern, but she did not need to worry. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay, but I am here when you are ready." I drove home from that lunch and told Derek that Clara was being dramatic and overstepping. He nodded and said he had always found her a little much. I agreed with him. I think about that drive home sometimes, about how completely I had been turned against the one person who was trying to pull me out. I was the one who had been unfair, or paranoid, or hurtful, or had misremembered, or was going through something and needed to talk to someone. He never raised his voice. He never got defensive in a way that looked defensive. He just quietly, consistently, made me doubt everything I saw and heard and felt. I started to believe I was broken, that something in my mind was not working correctly, that I was the kind of person who invented problems. I started walking on eggshells around my own perception of reality. I started checking myself before I spoke, asking myself, is this real, or am I making it up again? The effects were not just in my head. I stopped sleeping properly. I would lie awake at night replaying conversations, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong, what I had misunderstood, why my version of events never seemed to match his. I lost weight without trying. I stopped going to my pottery class, something I had done every Thursday for 3 years, because I could not find the energy for anything that was just for me. I stopped calling friends as often because every conversation felt like an effort, and I did not know how to explain what was happening when I could not even explain it to myself. My mother noticed first. She called me one Sunday and said, "You sound different. Are you okay?" I told her I was fine, just tired. She said, "You have been tired for a long time." I changed the subject, because somewhere in the back of my mind I knew that if I started talking, I would not be able to stop, and I was not ready for what that meant. The night everything changed was a Thursday in November. I came home early from a work event. I had a headache, and I had told my colleague I would see her Monday. I did not tell Derek I was coming home early because it did not occur to me that I needed to. His car was in the driveway. The lights were on upstairs. I walked in through the front door and I stood in the hallway, and I heard voices. 2 voices. His and a woman's. And not the kind of voices that are having a conversation. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a long moment. Then I turned around quietly and walked back down. Not running, just walking, controlled. Back through the hallway, back to the garage, back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and my heart hammering, and I called Clara and told her what I had heard. She said, "Stay where you are. Do not go back up." So I stayed. I sat in my own garage, and I waited. And in that waiting, every conversation of the last 2 years played back in my mind. Every time I had apologized for something I had seen clearly. Every time I had questioned my own memory. Every time I had looked in the mirror and wondered what was wrong with me. I had not imagined any of it. I heard them before I saw them. Voices coming down the stairs, through the house, toward the front door. I watched through the small garage window as the front door opened and a woman stepped out onto our porch. They spoke for a moment in low voices. He kissed her. She walked down the path and got into a car parked at the end of the street. He stood at the door and watched her go. I waited 1 minute after the front door closed. Then I got out of the car, walked through the garage door into the house, and called his name. He spun around. The look on his face in that moment told me everything I had spent 2 years trying to prove. When I walked back inside, Derek was in the kitchen. He looked at me and said, "You are home early." I said, "I am." He said, "How was the event?" And I looked at this man who I had spent 6 years loving, who had spent the last 2 years making me believe I was losing my mind, who had just walked a woman out of our home and was now asking me about my evening, and I felt something settle in me, something very quiet and very final. I said, "I know, Derek." He said, "Know what?" I said, "Everything. I know everything." He tried. He actually tried. He said I was tired and stressed and I had come home to an empty house and imagined something that was not there. He said he had been on a work call. He said the woman I thought I heard was on the television. He said he was worried about me and thought we should make an appointment with someone because this level of paranoia was not healthy. 2 years ago, that would have worked. It did not work anymore. I pulled out my phone. I had recorded the voices from the hallway. 40 seconds of audio. Clear enough. I pressed play. The room went completely silent except for the recording. His voice. Her voice. Unmistakable. Undeniable. 40 seconds that made 2 years of my self-doubt collapse in on itself, like a building that had been hollow the entire time. When it ended, I looked at him. He said nothing for a long moment, and in that silence, I watched something happen in his face that I had never seen before. The careful composure, the patient expression, the practiced concern, all of it dissolved. What was underneath was not remorse. It was calculation. I could see him working through his options in real time, deciding which version to try next. He chose anger. He said I had invaded his privacy. He said recording someone without their consent was illegal. He said I had clearly been planning this for a long time, and that said something about me and about the state of our marriage. He said he had been unhappy for years, and I had never bothered to ask why. I let him finish. Then I said, "My lawyer will be in touch." I picked up the bag I had packed while he was still talking, and I walked out the front door and I did not look back. He called me 17 times that night. The messages were a masterclass in manipulation. First denial. Then a version of the truth where everything was my fault, because I had been so distant lately, so paranoid, so difficult to connect with, that he had felt pushed away. Then, an apology so elaborate and detailed that part of me, the part that had loved him for 6 years, wanted to believe it. I read every message. I saved them all. Then I went to sleep. The divorce took 7 months. He contested everything. He told people I had become unstable, that I had struggled with paranoia during our marriage, that he had tried to get me help. Some people believed him. They had seen the version of me from those 2 years, the anxious version, the one who doubted herself constantly, and it fit the story he was telling. But Clara knew the truth, and my journal had 2 years of the truth, written in my own handwriting. Dated, specific, undeniable. My lawyer used it well. I have been in therapy since the divorce, not because I am broken, because I spent 2 years being told I was, and I needed someone to help me dismantle that belief piece by piece. My therapist told me in our 3rd session that what I had described was textbook gaslighting, that my responses, the self-doubt, the constant checking, the apologizing, had been completely normal reactions to sustained psychological manipulation. I was not crazy. I had never been crazy. I had been systematically convinced that I was by someone who needed me to believe it in order to keep doing what he was doing. The last thing I did before I signed the final divorce papers was take out my journal. I read the first entry. The lipstick. My handwriting was shaky in that entry, uncertain, full of qualifiers. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I misremembered. Maybe something is wrong with me. I closed the journal, and I signed the papers. I was not wrong. I had not misremembered. Nothing was wrong with me. I knew exactly what I had seen. This story was submitted by one of our viewers. Names and details have been changed to protect her identity. If you want to share your own story with us, the link is in the description. Every story deserves to be heard. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this video with them. Subscribe to Confess to Me for new stories every week.